So a little bit of warm up, just some factoring. Don't forget how to do that because you're especially going to need it for your nonlinear systems when we get to those tomorrow, the next day, depending on when you're watching this video. So you could factor out an x, and then if you set each of your factors equal to 0, you come up with 3 solutions because you'd end up taking the square root, which gives you x equals 0 and positive and negative square root of 3. All right, back to these systems of equations. This time you don't have the equations, you're going to get to write your own. Okay, so I like to kind of highlight my information that I've got here. Read the problem first. It's a good place to start. So you know the average cost of buying a child's ticket and adult's ticket to an amusement park is $48. My goal overall is to find the cost of each ticket. So let me define some variables. A is going to be the price of my adult ticket, and C is going to be the price of my children's ticket. And then let's write a couple of equations. So that average cost of buying a child's and adult ticket means, hey, let's add up the two costs and divide by 2 to get the average. We know that's equal to $48. We also know the adult ticket costs $12.50 more than the child's ticket. So however much my child's ticket is, if I add $12.50 to it, that will equal the cost of my adult ticket. So there are my 2 equations. You could solve with substitution or with elimination. I'm actually going to do some substitution since my second equation is already solved for A. So if I substitute that in to my first equation and do a little bit of simplifying, combine some like terms, we could make that 2c plus 1250 all over 2 is equal to 48. Easiest way is to just multiply both sides times 2 so that you no longer have a fraction, and then you'll end up with 2c plus 1250 equals 96. Had to think about that for a second. All right, subtract 1250 from both sides, and you end up with 83.50. Divide by 2. Cost of your child's ticket is $41.75. Oh, those pricey amusement parks. Let's plug it back into our equation that we had a minute ago to get your price of your adult ticket. So add $12.50 to it, and you'll get your adult price ticket is $54.25. All right, cool. Same process, you just had to write your own equations. All right, skip down. I already defined my variables. We're trying to figure out, we've got these 3 different ingredients in our animal feed, how much of each type we should use to get a certain amount of protein, fat, and fiber. So if I need 22 units of protein in this mix, let's write an equation that's gonna guarantee we get that amount of protein in this animal feed mix. So if I take my amount of protein in corn times the amount of corn I'm using, my amount of protein in beans times the amount of beans I'm using, and the amount of protein in cottonseed times my amount of cottonseed I'm using should equal my 22 units. Same idea for the amount of fat that I need in my final mix. Amount that's in each unit of corn times the amount of corn, and so on. Make sure that it adds up to a total amount of fat that is 28 units. And then fiber needs to be 18 units all added together. So from each individual ingredient, make sure that the amount of fiber adds up to a total of 18 units. So your system of 3 equations looks like that. I'm not going to have us solve this one, so there it is. All right, one more. Paint company wants to mix up 500 gallons of paint to sell, and we're using 3 different values worth of paint, some cheaper paint, some more expensive paint, and some really expensive paint. So we're looking for the amounts of each paint type that are gonna be in our mixed and poured together paint. Okay, so variable for each amount that we're looking for. Okay, things that we know. They want to mix up 500 gallons of paint to sell. So we're putting these 3 different kinds of paint together, and we're supposed to have a total of 500 gallons. So one equation would be if we add up our 3 amounts, it should equal 500 gallons of paint. Other things that we know, they're also using 3 times as much $3 paint as $5 paint. So my amount of $3 paint is going to be equal to triple my amount of $5 paint. So I could do A is equal to 3 times B. Because I have to think about those, make sure I don't get them backwards. So cheap paint is being used 3 times as much as my $5 paint. This paint is also supposed to have like a total value of $6 per gallon. My mixed together paint is supposed to be worth that much. So if you think about the value of your paint mix, if you take $3 times the amount of paint A we're using, $5 times the amount of paint B, and $7 times the amount of paint C, that's like the total amount of money that I've got sunk into my paint mix. If I divide that by 500 gallons, it's supposed to come out to be 6, so my third equation would look like that. We can solve this. You don't have to watch me solve it if you already know how to do this, but we could do some substitution. I would probably plug in 3b for A so that I get down to an equation that just has B and C in it, and I would substitute that into both of my other 2 equations. So if you do that, you end up with 2 new equations that just have B and C in them. That second one, to make it a little bit prettier, I would go ahead and combine my terms and then multiply both sides times 500. That way you don't have to deal with fractions. So you'll end up with that third equation, slightly nicer version. Just looks like 14b plus 17c equals 3,000. You could then take those 2 equations that just have b and c in them, and you could work on solving for either b or c. I'm going to move them down to a new page because I ran out of space. So if you take those 2, you could do substitution, you could do elimination, it doesn't matter. Let's do some elimination. I'm going to eliminate c, so multiply that bottom equation times -7, which gives you a new equation. And I like doing this on the iPad. I'm just going to erase that middle equation, line them up there. So if you add those together, you get -14b equals -500. These values in this problem don't come out nicely, so it's going to be an ugly number. If you take -500 and divide it by 14, you end up with 35 5/7 gallons of $5 paint that you're using. You could then plug that back in. I'm just going to plug it back into that yellow equation and solve for the amount of paint C that you're using. Again, it's not going to be a pretty value. So that's 500, subtract, divide by 7. You end up with 357 1/7 gallons for the amount of paint C that you're using. So a lot of expensive paint, probably because we needed that value to be pretty high, $6 per gallon. And then go back to one of your original equations. I'm just using the one that was A plus B plus C equals 500. So if you subtract our amounts of paints B and C from 500, you get the amount of $3 paint that we're going to use is just going to be 107 1/7 gallons.